still come up with a conclusion that is applicable to the real world. Once you have to control so many variables, you stop having studies that are applicable.
Well, we don't even know. We don't even know why they're eating most of the stuff. Like most of these bass lures these guys throw, they don't look like anything in the lake at all. Like, these giant creature baits and shit. Like, why are the fish even eating this stuff? Like, it's just like it's a reaction. If we were able to know more about why they ate it, we'd be better fishermen. We don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, and it is kind of boiling it down a bit, but, fish don't have hands. And so a lot of their curiosity is just done with their mouth. And sometimes that's like eating things because they have the ability to spit things out, if they realize that something's bad. Up until the existence of hooks, they were pretty good at cake it in your mouth. Oh, that's not something I want. Spit that out. And now, they've sort of encountered the problem of they can't spit it out when they realize it's not so good. So it may just be that, that billions of years of just testing stuff out with your mouth, and now it's coming to bite them.
That's the first time I've ever heard that. That just blew my mind. They don't have hands, so they have to feel everything with their mouth. That's unbelievable. Hello and welcome to episode number 62 of the NJ Multi-Species Podcast. I am your host, Joe Santiago, and as always, my partner, Chris Pereira.
What's up?
That's it. What's up? Past week, a lot of shit went on. Went bass fishing with John Dorn. We caught a lot of fish Thursday, very early in the morning. Caught a couple real nice fish. Bass.
Now you're a bass fisherman?
Full blown, yeah. Ned rigs and buying up all this jigs and shit. Then we fished the Merrill Creek Topwater Bassers Tournament. John caught 7 fish. I caught nothing. We finished in 13th place, I think, out of 37 boats.
Why would he fish with you in a tournament anymore? You caught nothing? You contributed nothing?
Nothing. It was an open buddy tournament. Like I said, we practiced Thursday, and I did okay. And then Saturday, he caught these 7 fish within 1 hour, and then the next 7 hours we couldn't get anything. And he had 2 decent fish in the box too. If he could have just called 2 of them, he would have been in. It just couldn't make it happen, man. Hours and hours, and it was so hot. Just couldn't get fish to bite. We tried everything: beat the bank, go out to the flats. Ned rigs.
Did you do anything like what I told you to do? Because
he did, yeah. I didn't, but he did. It
didn't work?
No, nothing. It just the most successful thing for us was the Senko again. The Senko is just how do you not throw the Senko?
Did you put it under a bobber?
No bobbers on the Senko. Last night I got to go out for Kronk's birthday on Lake Apacon with Eddie Mackin's Rippin' Lips fishing trips. I got it right, first shot. Yeah, there was 8 of us on the boat. Max was there, Bruce Litton, Kronk. It was Kronk's birthday. Brendan was there. Jen was there. It was fun as hell. There was a couple other guys too. And I showed up just expecting a booze cruise. I just brought a backpack with a shirt. But Mackin showed up he was ready to go to war, dude. He had 8 rods ready, 2 airbags of herring. I'm holy shit, we're really going fishing. And they actually caught a couple nice smallmouth, a lot of bullheads. So it was just a blast. We were out for 4 hours. We just had a great time. Really fun. And you could rent the pontoon boats and do that yourself with your own friends whenever you want. Eddie owns that boat now, so yeah, that was just cool. Yeah. So it was a cool week.
Sounds like a cool trip. Yeah, I wanted to go. There's no way. I was just beat to shit.
Well, are you
from
going to
the
talk
trip.
about your trip or no?
Yeah, I mean, it's not New Jersey. I thought I wasn't allowed to.
Well, you're from New Jersey, so I mean, it's a trip anyone from New Jersey could go on.
I guess you could say that about anything. But I'll just real quick. I mean, this is a trip that I highly recommend. I don't know how else to put it. Just, I very highly recommend this trip. I mean, it's white sturgeon fishing on the Columbia River near the Dalles in Oregon. And I'm sure there's a couple of guides that do it, but we went out with two of the best in the game, Charlie Foster and Phil Wildman. And if anyone has any questions, I forward them the information to do a trip like this. It's incredible. I mean, you're talking 300 to 400 pound fish, very common, like not rare at all. I mean, we caught the days we fished were very slow in comparison to how good it could be. And in 2 days, we caught 12 fish, and only one of them was small enough to pick up out of the water. The rest of them were 5-6 foot plus, and I want to say at least, I'm trying to think in my head right now, at least 4 or 5 of them were all over 8 feet, probably up to 9 foot or so. It's incredible. I mean, and these fish will frequently jump straight out of the water. I mean, where else are you going to see a 300-400 pound fish in fresh water jump out of the water?
And all these pictures and videos from this trip are available slowly on our Instagram page and everywhere else now if you want to see.
I got to go through the videos and stuff and pull out all. I got one shot of one of them jumping. The funny thing was, all day, the first day, I filmed every fight, the entire fight, just hoping to catch a glimpse of one jumping, and they never jumped. The first fish on the second day, when I didn't start recording it because I went to go release the anchor for the captain, the damn thing jumped, like clear out of the water. Like this big ass 400-pound fish just jumped. I didn't get it, but I did get one later that day. So I did catch one nice fish jump. It's a little far away, but still cool as hell. And also during one of the fights, Kyle's was reeling the fish, and the reel handle actually broke off with attached to big sturgeon, 8-foot sturgeon ended up being, and we were able to keep the fish on while the captain replaced the handle on the reel with another handle. He took a handle off another reel, replaced the snapped handle off the reel he was using, and he went back to fighting it, and we landed that fish, and I got that all on video too. I mean, it was awesome. It's an awesome trip. I highly recommend everyone to do this at some point in their life, and you'll want to go back for sure. It's just an awesome fishery. It's so cool.
Yeah, the pictures do look cool. I don't fly. If I flew, I would have went, but I just refuse to fly. One day maybe I'll fly.
Very strange. Very strange.
Yeah, I don't like airplanes. It's not my thing. I'd rather just take a train or a boat. I don't fly.
Mike Herman and Yellow Dog Paddle wrapped up their final trip of the season on Round Valley. They're now moving to Spruce Run. Mike the other day caught a monstrous rainbow trout as a really cool giveaway idea. Later today, Mike is going to post the picture of that rainbow trout. He's going to co-collab us in it, so you'll see it on our Instagram too, or his. You have to like the post, follow Yellow Dog Paddle, and guess the length of the fish. Whoever guesses the closest length of this rainbow trout is going to win a free trip with Yellow Dog Paddle. If anyone ties, you're going to guess the weight as a tiebreaker. He has a picture of the fish on a scale. So watch for that picture later today. Really cool shot at a free trip, free win, and a free giveaway from Yellow Dog Paddle. It'll be out later today.
Hybrids. What other news? Oh, the Round Valley Bass Tournament on July 20th. The turnout so far for that pre-registration hasn't been good. if more people don't register for that, they're going to have to cancel it. So the Round Valley Trout Association is trying to build this new bass division because the lake now has a solid enough bass fishery. So if you're like, I understand most guys who ever joined that club, they joined it because they don't like bass fishing. They have trolling boats. They're not there to bass fish.
Yeah.
So in order to build this new kind of like side little bass league that the RVTA is going to have, they need bass members. If you're a bass fisherman and you like bass fishing contests and you like fishing Round Valley, you might want to just join RVTA, because if these contests work, it's going to be like a new thing. It's the RVTA Bass Division. But you need the membership in order for this stuff to happen.
Yeah, I think what happens, this happens with a lot of things too. Guys kind of wait until they say, "Oh, that sounds all right. Maybe I'll join it later when it gets bigger or whatever." But what they don't understand is it takes a certain amount of people to get in when it's not big to make it big. So
you really need the participation to get this kind of stuff off the ground. And, some of it's really good ideas, and they just never get going because no one participates in it.
I mean, you've been bashing bass fishing for quite some time now, so I don't know if talking about this on the show is really going to help.
Let me clear this for the record. I do not dislike bass fishing. I dislike bass fishermen or bass anglers. The tunnel vision of a bass fisherman is what gave us the idea to create everything you see before you. Mayhem, this podcast, the shirt I'm wearing, the logo, it's all based around not bass fishing. That's all it is. So if your bass shit doesn't do well on my website, I understand why, because it's built of an army of people that hate bass. That's what it is. But no, we don't hate bass. I love bass. I just don't like the tunnel, like the bobber thing. I don't want to do this right now. Tonight's guest is some kind of an anonymous biologist who no one knows who he is, but he has 350,000 Facebook
He's not an anonymous biologist. He's I don't know how else to phrase. He's a YouTube personality, I guess the best way to put it. He has an incredibly popular YouTube channel.
Very popular.
He's a fish biologist.
Real quick, let me just throw in there, though, also, the Round Valley Veterans Tournament. If you have an able-bodied boat capable of fishing Round Valley, they are still looking for volunteers to take veterans out. There are veterans that would still like to go that don't have a boat. So we need volunteers. Me and Chris, unfortunately, our boat's already full. We have our vet, but if you have an able-bodied vet, it's a great day. And like I said, we really need the participation. One more thing, Chris, I have to say before the guest comes on. I have to thank everyone for the shirt thing. I think the shirt thing might be one of the most overwhelming situations since the project started for me. I don't know if Chris feels the same way or not, but we're actually starting to see the shirts all over the place, and it's really cool. Like, somebody took a picture of Power Bait Paul in a bait shop down south. He had one on. There was a picture from the deck of the fishmonger. Someone had stuff for the fish on. When I got on the pontoon boat last night, a bunch of guys there had them. Like we usually say, it's the shirt I'm wearing. We sell them for cost because we kind of want everyone to have one. If we could afford, obviously, to give everyone one, we would, but we can't. So we could just sell them for what they cost us, and that's that.
Well, one time we were given a box of them, and we were supposed to sell them, and we ended up throwing them all away for free to people. And
I'm banned now from ever getting any shirts again. Deuce has the merchandise all locked away. I have the stickers, though. He doesn't have those. I have the stickers, though. But yeah, the
No,
merch is locked away because I think Jerry Zagorski's wife threw all the shirts out into the crowd, and yeah,
No, it's
listen. When I show up with some shirts, I don't want to sell them because I don't want your money. I end up just giving them to you because I feel bad, but I actually do have to pay for those. I mean, we sell. You get the short sleeve for $17 and the long sleeve for 20. But we really do appreciate it, Chris. I don't know. Every time I see someone now post one of these pictures online, I think it's the coolest thing ever. And
yeah,
we know Deuce is going to make the wall or the hall of suffering, whatever, and it's going to be like if you send your picture in with the shirt on, we're going to put this wall together. We're working on it.
Yeah, we're gonna make like a album, like a photo album that you could click through on the site or wherever of people fishing wearing the gear and call it, like you said, the Hall of Suffering or whatever.
Yes.
And yeah, it's definitely we could do some kind of contest with it too, like,
and that could
people can vote
definitely
for-
that could definitely turn into a calendar. Also, easily be a calendar.
Oh God, really? We're doing the calendars?
We listen. Deuce pitched us the calendar
right now.
idea. Deuce pitched us the calendar idea, and we told him it was stupid. And then everyone started asking us for calendars. So this next year we might have.
Who asked you for a calendar?
People asked for calendars, dude.
If
Like, how are you guys
you-
gonna do
No.
mayhem calendars? They want Yeah.
If you make a calendar, you know how many calendars you're gonna sell? The exact amount of how many people you put in the calendar.
That's true. What if we put like 12 people in each month though? Like
Then you'll sell a lot of calendars.
all right, where's the guest here? Because we're hitting dead
He's
air.
having a little bit of trouble getting in, so.
Oh, as usual. Well, that's nothing new. But yeah, we really do appreciate the shirt thing. Every time we see a shirt, we appreciate it. And like I said, I wish we could afford to give everyone a free one, but unfortunately, we just can't do that.
No, I mean it's cool for sure. I mean, I've been saying that phrase, like we'll be out there fishing. You heard me say it years before we started this. I used to say it to Dwayne all the time. Dwayne say it back to me. When you're out there and the fishing just sucks and you're suffering through whatever it is, heat, rain, your back hurts, your knees hurt, your feet hurt, whatever, you want to, it'd be so much easier just to stop fishing and go home, and you just suffer through it because whatever you're trying to catch that day, and sometimes a victory may just be a small version of some species that you're targeting, may not even be an impressive fish to anyone else, but you suffered through whatever it was, catch that fish, and it means something. And
I don't think Chuck Manny's taken his. Every picture I've seen of him since he's gotten his is in that shirt. Like, he's always in it. He sent me a picture. He sent me a picture today holding two porgies, and like the shirt looks like it's just like been through a war already. Like, it's covered in blood and shit. Like, he needs a new one already. Like, gotta get Chuck.
And he's the epitome of the phrase "suffer for the fish."
Oh yeah,
nothing's going to stop him.
Never.
He's just gonna keep going, and that's it. That's what
I
it's
don't
about.
even think he checks the weather. I don't. He might like glance at it, but I don't think it matters anyway. He's going.
If it's dangerous, he'll turn around. Maybe
he'll turn around. He'll turn. He's never gonna like look at the weather report. No, he go. No, he's gonna go, and if it's bad, he just turn around. All right, Deuce. Can we go to a commercial break?
Dude.
A lot of the stuff that me and Chris do and the adventures that we go on, unfortunately, we're not rich, so they are funded by people like Yellow Dog Paddle and Eddie Mackin, and also NJFishing.com. 27 years is the #1 fishing resource in New Jersey. Free to register a username. And Chris, you could basically go back through the archive of the website for however long you can read on for about saltwater or fresh.
Yep. And speaking about funding things, what funds my fishing in New Jersey is the information I get off of njfishing.com. Decades of information. That's what funds my fishing knowledge. That's what funds my fishing success 90%. even the people I met on there, the information I get from them, I'm telling you, the best.
Yeah, so head on over to njfishing.com. If you email Jerry Zagorski, he will make you an account name for free, and then you could post and read on the message board as much as you want. So our next guest is finally here. We have AVNJ from YouTube. He is a freshwater fisheries biologist. AVNJ, thank you for coming on the NJ Multi-Species podcast.
Of course.
How's it going?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, you came recommended by a couple of guys that listened to the show. I actually had not run across your YouTube channel before someone told me about it, and I did. Obviously, I checked it out. Really cool YouTube channel. Not a fishing YouTube channel.
There are
some.
That's the thing. I understand why you wouldn't have come across it because there are fishing videos, but they're not necessarily the typical, going out to the jetty with a rod and reel. It's more so like exploring places, trying to find different species, that kind of thing.
Right.
When I do those types.
But your YouTube channel it's monstrous. The following on it is huge.
Yeah, there was, a couple of years ago, there was a video where I was just doing some basic science debunking some dumb stuff people were saying about sharks, and a lot of people liked it and it blew up.
Now, what were you saying about sharks? You want to talk about that?
We can. It's
what were
mostly
you
about them.
Exactly?
Just the people who think that the megalodon is still alive for one reason or another.
It's because they saw it in a movie. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, pretty much. No, you should have seen I think the reason that people resonated with that video so much is the video that I was like reacting to and debunking was so ridiculous. Like one of their pieces of evidence was like an inflatable shark, and they were unironically presenting it as evidence.
This wasn't a joke from them?
I still to this day I'm not sure, but I don't think so.
I don't know.
I'm trying to figure out if the flat Earth thing's a joke, but I don't think it's a joke. They're for real.
I think it's one of those things that like starts as someone saying it jokingly, and then people go down the pipeline.
Yeah, I think like anything else, I think people just kind of go down. What do they call it? Go down the rabbit hole like late at night.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And a couple of they come across a couple of things that make sense. And then it just spirals from there.
And then they end up watching this podcast and then use the computer again.
Well, let me just to bounce off the shark thing for like a serious topic, I guess. So obviously, like shark fishing in New Jersey is a touchy subject. It's prohibited. I don't remember the exact wording, but basically, it's prohibited to target. And then there's a list of species, which basically is every single species that you can target from the surf in New Jersey.
Right.
Now, that being said, right, you can't really target a specific type of shark when you're fishing for them. So the wording of these new regulations over the last couple of years kind of leaves it open that you can still shark fish from the shore, but you kind of get put in this corner where and Joe and I ran into this problem kind of where if you catch a shark that's on the prohibited list, which is usually what you're going to catch, to unhook it, if that fish comes out of the water, I think more than 3 inches, like when the wave kind of comes back off the sand, like they can bust you on that.
Yeah.
I guess from a biologist standpoint, what's the right thing to do here? Like, do we ban shark fishing? Is it not as detrimental to the sharks as they want us to believe it is if the wave comes back off of them for 30 seconds while you're unhooking them and you kind of wait for the next wave to come in and you kind of drag them a couple feet back in and they swim off? What's your take on that?
I think the problem is that it's extremely situational, and regulations are meant to be like a strict, they have to be a strict wording of how things are going to happen, and trying to put a strict wording in situations that really require common sense is just always going to be difficult. There's going to be situations where it feels too strict, and then there's going to be situations where like it clearly doesn't make sense. Treating all the sharks the same, so you can pull up an endangered species and treat it the exact same way as a black tip that's everywhere. And then also but from the biology perspective, generally they're pretty hardy, sharks in general. It's taking them out of the water for an extended period of time, obviously not a good idea, especially the ones that are, require ram ventilation, require a continued swimming water through their gills. But for a short period of time, I mean, really, it's not terribly impactful. There's similar debates we talk about with minnows. So a lot of the guys who do life listing, catching, small minnows, they like to take in-hand photos with them. And so they'll, hold the fish out of the water 30 seconds to a minute, take the in-hand photo and release it. And I've seen a lot of like criticism in the same regard of like taking the fish out of the water, can't breathe in that, that regard. And from everything that I have seen, and of course, I don't follow them the rest of their lives after they're released, but from everything that I've seen, there's extremely low mortality for most species when it comes to that. There are species that are hypersensitive, like I'm sure like bunker or anchovy. They get pulled out of the water for 10 seconds, they're dead. It's done. Baby shad, blueback, and herring, yeah, they're dead. Sharks at that size, I mean, I have to imagine they're hardy enough to handle that kind of thing. I wouldn't have that much concern. That being said, like I said, there are species that are more sensitive, and there are species that are, theoretically, we don't want a hook ever going in their mouths. And so that's why it's kind of difficult to handle, because making a regulation based on intent is it's really difficult, because you can't predict what shark you're going to catch out in the water. If you could, that would make everything a whole lot simpler.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think it's hard to say to make like the most general overarching regulation. I think what's in place now in terms of keeping the shark in the water as much as possible is a good thing. I think the whole idea of intent in regulations is just a slippery slope, where trying to have it be enforceable, where if someone was trying to catch us targeting a certain thing and then they accidentally caught a different thing, that they're now on the hook for that. I think it just needs to be, if you catch this thing, you're on the hook for that thing, regardless of intent. It's really hard to have an officer go out there, a game, or go out there and try and assess the intent of the person when trying to enforce those laws. I think that just makes the situations a little messy.
Can I add, if I'm going to change the fish, but like I've
Totally.
heard biologists on podcasts say like fish like a steelhead, that the
sorry, man.
like 60% of the steelhead that you release die. Like even the ones you release clean that swim off, they die after you don't see them. I mean, are numbers like that realistic, or is that made up?
They could be realistic. I think in that case, what you're looking at causing the issue is more so the fight than the actual holding them out of the water, taking a picture. The moment you pull them out of the water, you take a picture of them in your hands, that moment of deprived of oxygen is probably not that big of a deal, but the actual fight in between, I'm sure, can be quite traumatic on their bodies, and they're using all the energy that they have on them. They're going to be, tired right away. They can get swept to a predator. They can get swept, it's not always the case with trout, but swept to a predator, swept into some sort of like fast riffle and bashed against a rock or something like that, and not have the energy to, swim away like that. Or they just may not recover the energy in time to get the food that they need to replenish that. I don't know what the statistics are specifically based on in the one that you're talking about, but I do think that if a fish is super tired by the time that it comes to shore, and there aren't like a lot of efforts by the fishermen to try to rejuvenate the fish before it's on its way, I think there definitely could be a high mortality rate.
So, all right. So now, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is always just what I have thought.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like the way a fish breathes is nothing like how we breathe oxygen, right? If a fish comes out of the water and its gills are wet, it can still take oxygen out of the water on its gills for a short period of time, depending on situations. But so
they can even take it out of the air as well.
All fish,
they're not.
yeah. All fish, huh? Yeah, that I didn't know.
Yeah, well, for the most, some fish require it, are obligate air breathers. Some fish, require to be underwater for the most part, but their gills are still capable of taking in oxygen from the air. But it's a much, much lower efficiency. It's not enough to sustain them, but they're not like directly being choked out when they're out of the water.
Would
But
you?
it's not the same as like if, because you hear people like to compare people who don't fish and who are like against fishing and against touching any animal ever or eating any animal. They compare it to if they held you underwater and you couldn't breathe at all for the same amount of time, and it's just ridiculous. But what I was getting at, yeah. But so my point of this is, so if I'm fighting a fish, and again, this is what I've always thought and what I've tried to do, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. So if let's say I'm fighting a fish, I hook a bigger fish than I'm targeting. My gear's a little bit light. The fight's longer than I expected for whatever reason. I get that fish in, I scoop it in the net. What I like to do is I don't pull it out of the water. I get the net under it, but I leave it right there. I let it sit in the water. Does that help? Because if the fish is tired, it stays in the water. It doesn't come out of the water right away. I let it sit there for a minute or two in the water, in the basket of the net, not tangled in the net. One of those hard rubber nets. Those are the ones I use. And just leave it there. Would that help in theory, or am I just tricking myself?
I think everything helps, but it depends on like I said, what the issue is going to be when you release the fish. Like if the issue is that the fish is, using up a ton of oxygen in the fight and you're helping it get its reoxygen, maybe get some energy back, that's good. But if it's still going to be tired when it gets released and it's just going to get thrown into a big rock, it's going to be the same issue regardless. But I mean, it's probably a marginal difference, but I'm sure it's a difference. Everything you can do in that regard, it's going to help. They're just in a vulnerable situation when they've been fighting like that. They're not made to. A lot of these fish that we fish for are burst hunters. They're burst evaders, so they're really not meant for these like long fights. I mean, they want to get their food quickly and they want to evade their predators quickly. So it can be extremely traumatic on just like the body as a whole kind of doing that thing. So what they're going to need in that situation varies, and I don't know. I think it's good that you do that, and I'm sure it raises, or lowers the mortality rate by a percentage or two, but I don't know how much you can guarantee that that's doing something every time.
So what I'm hearing from this, Joe, is fly fishermen kill tons of fish.
Well, that's why listen, this was on the Meat Eater podcast, and the biologist was his brother. And the brother was actually saying like 60% of the fish, the steelhead that you release cleanly, like even if you see them swim off, they die. And I'm saying you got to like, I don't believe it because I don't see that shit. But
what AVNJ is saying to all this really is like, what's that base of? There's too many variables. Like, what are the variables? Like, what did they do to release it? Did they take extra steps to, did they use a little bit heavier gear to shorten the fight?
Well,
did they revive the fish in salt water?
That fish might not be built for these long river fights, and who knows?
Right. I mean, it's like when you're saying a statistic, anytime someone's saying a number, it's ideally, unless they're just making the number up or trying to, whatever, it's from a study, and that study is going to have specific conditions. So it's like we catch the fish, we battle it for this long, we hold it out of the water for this long, and then we follow them to check mortality at this rate. And even if you did that exact study and got an exact mortality rate and he was quoting that exact number, that is, you have to have minimized the variables, everything else is controlled. So you're not taking into account a billion different other factors that come in. Every fight is different, every fish is different, every place that even if the same stream, probably 20 feet up versus 20 feet down, there might be a riffle that the fish gets released into and has an issue with that it might not have, 20 feet down. Like there's just too much.
You could never do this study properly as far as science is concerned, in my mind, because
I can't imagine how you would control it.
Exactly.
It's always kind of been in my head that every fish that I've ever revived and let swim away lived. It's never occurred to me that 20 minutes later they're rolling over dead and I don't see it happen.
It's certainly possible.
Yes,
I don't
you
don't
can't be
like
sure.
that,
I mean,
actually. I don't like knowing that.
Well, deal with it. And Santa Claus ain't real either.
Ugh.
well, what I can say, it's not guaranteed that that's the case. I don't know where that number came from, and even like he said, if you had like a lab environment and like a mock stream, and you set up the whole thing, and you got a statistic from that, it's still hard to say how replicable that is in every situation. I think if you're doing the best you can for the fish, you're using the appropriate gear, you're doing your best.
Let me ask this question, because I just had this experience for the first time over the weekend.
Okay.
I fished in like my first ever fairly large bass tournament.
Okay.
At the end of the tournament, there's 38 boats heading into the boat launch to have the weigh-in. A lot of boats have a 5-fish bag on board. It ends up being a very large number of fish. After the fish are weighed in, they all just get dumped into the boat launch again. And there's tournaments, obviously, of other species, but the bass ones are the most common ones that happen basically every weekend. There's a bass tournament.
Right.
How does that affect the fishery when these fish are constantly being moved? Like every weekend, they're thrown into a live well, driven back to the boat launch, and then let go again. Like, what does that do to a lake?
That's an interesting question. I don't have a particular study in mind, but if I had to guess, I would say that there's probably a decent amount of mortality from that. I know specifically from times where I've been out, we didn't hook and line. We'll shock bass when we're doing lake surveys, but even keeping them in the live well for however long, measuring them and then releasing them, we'll still see them a little bit lethargic, maybe a little bit in shock as they go out into the water. And I imagine those fish live, but it has to have an impact, that especially if you're talking about that happening every single week. I don't know how much they have to stock. That's something you'd have to talk to the people running the lake, and that would probably answer your question, is how often do you guys have to restock this because there's a high mortality rate, or maybe, I don't know, the fish in the lake are so used to it at this point. Are you pulling up fish that have like multiple holes in their lip? Like, is this
No,
the same
every
fish
week
coming
is
up every week?
Every week's an exaggeration, but
Okay.
they're fairly big bass tournaments on small lakes, and it's a
Right.
lot of fish getting displaced.
Yeah, my guess is that there's just a really high stocking effort by whoever maintains the lake, in terms of feeder fish, in terms of plant life, the whole food chain, and probably in terms of replacing bass that die in those tournaments.
I'm guessing most of the bass that would die in a situation like that, it's not because they moved them, it's because of the live well situation, like the fact that they
Right.
were in a live well for a period of time, which could be hours if they were
Right.
caught early, right? I mean, those
Or even
live
just like
wells.
mishandling,
Do you
like
think do you think when you throw that fish back in at the boat launch, it goes and looks and tries to find where it was, or it just starts over again?
I think it's a funny question, but I think it starts over again.
It starts over. So the best
There are
the best
there
time
are
to ever
intelligent
go
fish.
bass fishing is the day after a bass tournament in the boat launch, because that's where all the fish are.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite places to fish for bass. Or
I do think
giant
there
sunfish,
are,
we should say.
Yeah, I do think there are fish that are intelligent enough to seek out specific locations and remember specific locations. I mean, salmon are well known for seeking out exact sections of streams based on tiny particles in the water. But my guess, knowing bass and their intelligence and the studies on them, is they're more of like a stimuli and response type of fish. So they're going to get dropped into the water and they're going to go, oh, there's some weeds, I'm going to go hide in those, or I'm going to go look for a crystal. Once they're out of shock, that is, if assuming they were in shock from the whole situation.
Being involved in that field that you're involved in, would you consider yourself an environmentalist or a conservationist?
I honestly don't have a good head definition that separates the two.
Basically, a environmentalist is a conservationist is an environmentalist with a gun and a fishing pole, basically. In a nutshell.
I suppose I'm an environmentalist then.
Do you hunt?
I do not know.
Yeah, he's an environmentalist. Yeah.
It doesn't mean he's against hunting.
No, it doesn't. But he's probably an environmentalist.
Whatever, Joe. You had that's your third stupid question in a row.
That's not a stupid question.
Because you mentioned fish intelligence, I have to ask this because just for Max's sake, our buddy, are carp the smartest fish in the world?
No, not even remotely close.
All
They're
right,
not unintelligent.
I don't need
though.
anything else. They're not, Max. They're stupid.
No. Listen,
Is there
they
a
get, I
fish
think
with
everything.
an impressive, like an impressive intellectual, like a freshwater fish that's smarter than all the other ones?
Generally, in fish, intelligence scales pretty linearly with size, whether it's saltwater or freshwater. I mean, just it makes sense, bigger brain, more blood going around. Like Goliath grouper are known for being absurdly intelligent in terms of like social skills and communication, and it's just because they're so damn big. Sharks, a lot of the bigger sharks are pretty intelligent. Some of the smaller sharks are less intelligent, but that's just because they're so ancient. And they also run on a lower energy total. In freshwater, it's hard to say. I'm trying to think of particularly intelligent fish. I think on average, the fish are more intelligent than people think. And I think people tend to associate like bottom feeder or like trash fish with lack of intelligence, like carp or like catfish. When in reality, I think catfish probably for the most part rank near the top as far as freshwater fish go in terms of intelligence.
Really?
And that's well, they have a lot of size. They have a sedentary lifestyle, so they're not using as much energy on, swimming and that kind of thing, but they're still taking in absolute tons of food. So that extra energy when it comes to, building muscle, building their body, that's the kind of thing that it's going to get used for over time. So, carp are not particularly intelligent, but they're not unintelligent. I mean, they take in a lot of biomass and they output a ton of biomass. They go through a lot of energy. Catfish the same way. Yeah, people would be surprised, I think, by the average intelligence, even of like little minnows and stuff in the stream. But saying that any particular fish is highly intelligent is probably untrue until you get to the very top of like whale shark, Goliath grouper, that type of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I oversimplify it, but basically, like a fish is not intelligent in the same aspect as like a mammal or a bird can be intelligent because they just don't have the same brain parts. They just don't have the same brain biology.
Yeah, we're still, there's so much research on that, but I still, all of that research, I still have the question, even as a scientist, of like, how do you measure intelligence? And every study takes a whole different take on what intelligence is. I mean, there are these studies that claim that octopi are as smart as us because they can recognize themselves in a mirror. And it's like, if that's your test of intelligence, then it's like, my golden retriever fails, but like, a clam might pass. There's weird bars that people put up for what intelligence means. And it's really hard to define. So I don't think we'll ever be able to like properly tell, other than just what you call like a vibe check. You just get the vibe of some animals and how adaptable they are to situations and good at solving problems.
What about the memory? Like when a fish gets caught, does he remember that like a week later?
There are studies that suggest that they will like avoid stimuli. So I think there's a study specifically with trout where they did some sort of tissue damage, harmed them, pricked them, something like that, and put a particular object in the tank, like a red cube or something like that. And then a few weeks later would put the red cube in and the fish would evade, have a prey response, and, implying that it associated something that it saw with that stimuli of being injured at the time. I don't know what the exact limits is of how long they remember those things. I'm sure it's dependent on the individual fish, but they definitely have a longer memory than most people would think, at least in an unconscious way. Like they're not swimming around thinking like, oh, I hope I don't see a red cube again. But if they do, their mind knows like that's a prey response type thing.
I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but I've caught the same fish on the same lure within, I don't know, 10 minutes.
Oh yeah.
Of it. So it's going to be
quicker than that.
Yeah. So it's also going to, after even everything you just said, it's going to be on an individual by individual basis. Even the fight of the fish is an individual by individual basis. I mean, you'll hook a hybrid striper that'll fight you like it weighs 20 pounds, and then you'll hook another one that's the same size. It'll like just roll over and just come in.
Yeah.
It depends on, there's just too many variables, just like the other thing.
Yeah, that is the problem with all science, unfortunately. There are just too many variables. There are very few studies that we can properly control everything we can control and still come up with a conclusion that is applicable to the real world. You know, once you have to control so many variables, you stop having studies that are applicable.
Well,
Yeah,
we don't even know. We don't even know why they're eating most of the stuff. Like most of these bass lures these guys throw, they don't look like anything in the lake at all. Like
No.
these giant creature baits and shit. Like, why are the fish even eating this stuff? Like, it's just like it's a reaction. If we were
Yeah.
able to know more about why they ate it, we'd be better fishermen. We don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, and it is kind of boiling it down a bit, but you know, fish don't have hands, and so a lot of their curiosity is just done with their mouth. And sometimes that's like eating things because they have the ability to spit things out, if, you know, if they realize that something's bad. Up until the existence of hooks, they were pretty good at cake it in your mouth. Oh, that's not something I want. Spit that
Yeah.
out. And now, you know, they've sort of encountered the problem of they can't spit it out when they realize it's not so good. So it may just be that, you know, that billions of years of just testing stuff out with your mouth, and now it's coming to bite them.
That's the first time I've ever heard that. That just blew my mind. They don't have hands, so they have to feel everything with their mouth. That's unbelievable. Yeah,
Makes so much sense. You blew Joe's mind.
Now, what would you say when you are fishing? Like,
Mhm.
am I more often catching a fish because it's actually hungry? Am I catching it because it's angry? Or am I more often catching it because it's just a reaction to have to bite it?
Probably species dependent. I will say fish don't exactly have a concept of hungry for the most part. They kind of just encounter food at the rate they encounter it, and they'll just eat it at the rate they eat it. You can, if you have an aquarium fish, you'll find out very quickly you can't overfeed them. They will keep eating until their body forces them to stop eating, and that's not them feeling full. That's just like they stop being able to function because they've filled up so much. With catfish being somewhat of an exception because they have elastic stomachs, but I would say probably most of the time it's just, you know, an unconscious response where it's just like I see something I want to bite and I'm going to bite it. They may be associating it with food. They may not be associating with food. Probably most of the time that they are. But yeah, they're not exactly hungry. That's, you know, that's
So
personifying it a little bit.
let me ask you this then, going off of that. So let's say a fish hasn't been able to catch food, hasn't eaten in whatever amount of time it is, where it's in a dangerous situation that it hasn't eaten in so long. Do they? Because you said that they don't feel hungry like what we would think of as feeling hungry. Does anything happen? Does some kind of instinct kick in that makes them desperate to find food, where they might eat something different or new, or does anything like that happen? Like,
Yeah, so in more intelligent, we see it in intelligent fish, and then sometimes in schooling fish, where the schooling fish are very interesting because they tend to be sort of like a hive mind, like a combined brain. Like obviously they're their own individual organism, but they all sort of think as if they're a whole organism as they move together. So they sort of have like a higher intelligence than the individual fish. But yeah, higher intelligence fish like sharks will do this. Sharks will basically, you could think of it as like a tier list in their brain of, other than tiger sharks who will eat literally anything. Most sharks have like a tier list in their brain of, you know, what they want to eat, and as you know, they get more and more desperate, they will go for lower and lower on the food chain. Like I said, a lot of schooling fish will do a similar thing. The most like famous example is piranhas. People always talk about hungry piranhas, where if you can starve piranhas for a while and then get in a pool with them and spill some blood and they won't even bite you for the most part. But if you know, get under the right conditions, and that is the hive mind of that school, they have, you know, obviously torn people apart. It's happened before. People crashed into rivers and such in those areas. So I think it tends, like the idea of hunger, it's not the same thing where it's like their body necessarily telling them. It's just them sort of knowing that they need to get food and they become a bit more desperate for it. I think we associate that more so with higher intelligence fish. It's not something like your local minnow doesn't have like a food bar like in a video game that it's trying to keep as high as it can.
Like a dumb carp isn't doing it, right?
I'm
I'm just kidding.
They eat constantly. Their mouth is just going, and whatever shows up, it just shows up. They don't even. There's no thought.
I like carp. I just need to bust Max's balls. But no, I mean, we like all fish. I mean, even Joe, who likes to bust on giant sunfish, aka bass, even he likes sunfish. Bass fishing now.
I love sunfish. A bass is not a sunfish.
Oh boy, did you hear what he just said?
I heard. It's a different genus, I guess. If you want to put it that way. But then, do you call crappie sunfish?
You talking who, me?
Well,
I call them panfish.
Okay, but do you call bass panfish?
No.
Okay, well then your definition makes no sense. I'm sorry.
So
a largemouth bass and smallmouth bass are the same. What is it? The same.
See, I can't. The smallmouth is such a like Northwoods like game fish compared to that green slug that's associated with it. It doesn't make sense to me at all. I don't want to bring up. Let's talk about.
There's a bunch of in betweens too, though. You got red eye and Coosa bass and Swanee bass. There's a lot of different species in that.
Joe,
genus.
what upsets Joe is that everyone loves largemouth bass fishing so much. It's the most popular sport and game fish in the world, and that's what gets him all tied in knots. I think because he wants all fish to have the same love as the largemouth bass.
I have to agree with him. I mean, I'm on an even more extreme level than you, where I'm out there catching and identifying minnows and shiners, and trying to get as many species of those. And I can't imagine the guy going to the pond and just throwing in his giant lure and pulling out the same bass every single day. It's like, you know what? If that brings you happiness, man, I'm happy for you. But it would be cool to see more appreciation of the other stuff.
And that's kind of like where we're at. Whatever floats your boat, basically. But it's the hating on the other stuff that kind of gets us riled up.
Yeah.
Listen, VNJ, I want to thank you so much for taking your time to.
Joe, I know you want to let him go, but we did have 2 questions from.
Oh, okay. I don't want to let him go.
Do you have time? Do you have time?
Absolutely.
He has time to answer him.
So we got one question. They wanted us to ask you what the hell's up with this south wind and how many wind farms do we have to put up to stop it? Kind of a joke of a question, but excuse me. But the real question behind it is, do you, from a biologist standpoint, the whole wind farm thing, is that actually harming the marine wildlife? I know you're mostly freshwater, but I'm sure you have an opinion from a biologist standpoint.
From what I've heard, it's on the lower impact side from what we've observed. But the problem is it's a new thing, and also like measuring impact is not something you can do very quickly. You can't just put a windmill in and then hang around there for a few days and be like, all right, well, everything's fine. Those take long-term studies, and this is the kind of thing where we've only started asking these questions recently. So we've only started doing these studies recently. So we just don't really have proper conclusions on that kind of thing. My guess, like my intuition, is that in small quantities in reasonable locations, they're not a big deal into the ecosystem. But I don't have any evidence to back that up. That's just intuition.
No, I'm just basically we're just looking for your opinion. We're not going to use this as any evidence for anything. Another question we had, and I didn't even know what this means. I'm sure you do. Someone want to know if hold on one second, where was it? They want to know if you had any idea when the state was going to be doing another round of FIBI reports, or if they're in any kind.
So the FIBI, so that's the Fish Index of Biotic Integrity. It's basically the sampling that the state does every year. They go out to all the streams, they shock them, they sample the fish, and then in some of the headwater streams, they'll do crayfish, frogs, salamanders, that kind of thing too. And then they'll post basically a survey list of what they found. And based on the ecosystem, the relative counts of the various things they find, they can assess how high quality a certain stream is. Because if you think about like a stream, let's say you have your backyard stream and you dump some toxic chemicals in it, and then they get washed down the stream, and someone comes a week later to test the water. For the most part, they're not going to test those chemicals. They're not going to be able to tell that anything happened there. But the biotic side of it can really tell us that kind of thing. So we can look at the stream and say, hey, well, there's none of the fish that are somewhat tolerant to the certain chemicals in the stream, and so that might indicate that there was some kind of pollution event in the stream. So the state maintains all of these surveys. They do them every year at probably close to 100 different sites throughout the summer every year across the state. They have been doing them. They've kept doing them every single year. The problem is that when they go to upload the data, they have to do it to this certain website. And from what I last heard, the person who made the last website no longer works there, and no one can figure out how to update it until they hire someone to make a new website. So for the time being, the data exists. It's just not published. What I will say is that is from the perspective of, that's Bureau of Freshwater and Biological Monitoring. So that's different than Fish and Wildlife. Fish and Wildlife do their own surveys, though to a lesser degree than Freshwater Monitoring does. But Fish and Wildlife doesn't really post their data at all. So there is data. It will be up eventually. I would just be happy that there's data at all, and because Fish and Wildlife doesn't post anything.
Yeah, that wasn't the answer I was expecting to hear, but I mean, when a lot of people are involved in something, I guess it's not that surprising of an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all these, the guys doing all these surveys are all like, older guys who just know a ton about fish, lifelong fishermen. They don't know how to put together a website. And so they hire some intern to do it, and then no one knows how to update it once they're gone. So you end up with the problem of we have the data, but how do we get it out there?
That's kind of like us. Like we fish a hell of a lot. We know how to talk about fishing. We don't know how to set up a podcast, and that's why you can hear that ghost voice from Deuce every once in a while, setting this up and making sure it all. There it is.
There it is. AVNJ, can I say
question?
Okay.
Sorry,
yes.
one last. I don't want to leave anyone out.
Okay, let's
go
not
ahead.
leave
Go ahead.
anyone out.
All right, one last question. So, one of the viewers from your podcast channel, I guess, must have saw one of your old videos where you talked about the Raritan River fish ladder viewing project.
Oh, okay.
Is that? I'm not sure. I didn't see the video. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I used to work on that project.
Okay, so I don't know much about that. I don't know if Joe does, but that's the fish ladder obviously over there so that the fish can migrate to spawn or whatever else. Like what's how successful is that, or did it kind of not meet the success that they were hoping, I guess is the question.
Oh boy, are you gonna love it. The whole point of that study and the installation of it was a test of that design, and the idea of we put a fish passage in. They're actually required on dams now, but they put the fish passage in, try to test on the way up and down. So they were, or we, I guess we can say we were tagging shad, and then they had these little micro tags on them, and sort of like how you go through an easy pass and it reads your easy pass. They had that in the tunnel for the fish passage, so we could tell when a tagged shad actually made it successfully through the passage. And then there was also a camera set up that would watch the end of the fish passage. So anything that made it through would go by this window, which a lot of fish passages had that. And there was a 24/7 live stream for multiple years throughout like the summer months where you could watch the fish come through the fish passage in the Raritan River.
Joe, that was Andy Still's favorite TV show.
I used to watch it. Listen, when Andy Still used to post the link, I used to watch it, and I never actually saw anything when I was watching it.
Okay.
But
Really?
I got to see the pictures of Andy. Like Andy would take a picture when something came by, and I saw those.
So let me tell you. Well, first of all, there were some interesting things that came by. We had we had a buffalo come by. The Midwest sucker fish came by. Grass carp, which isn't that surprising anymore. Quillback were a mainstay, like multiple quillback a day, which is really interesting because people don't think of quillback in the Raritan as much of a thing. Other than that, it's mostly the normal stuff coming through. What's funny about it is from like the best estimates, like probably the most generous estimates you could make, this thing had like a 1 in 1,000 accuracy. Like 1 in 1,000 fish that entered the little thing at the bottom made it out the other end. And
Really?
so we would see them. Yeah. So what I was doing actually, basically the window, the live stream was recording, 24 hours as well. And as our survey data, I would basically sit in my room and at 16 times speed, watch this footage back, watch hundreds of hours of footage and identify fish and, mark them down, put it in a spreadsheet as they came through. So I got to see basically all the fish that came through and all the fun stuff. It's a pretty low transfer rate. There were times where, like during rain, it seemed to have a higher efficiency for whatever reason. That being said, this is not a damage to the reputation of all fish passages. I have seen some actually incredibly efficient fish passages, some better designs. This particular one was like, have you ever seen the show Wipeout? Like the fish had to make it through like an American Ninja Warrior course. So like they first enter a little tunnel, but the tunnel to get into it is this like little, probably this size on the side of the wall of the dam. So first things first, the fact that, and it's on the side. So like the fish are going to swim forward, hit the dam and be like, and only if they explore enough to find this little passage do they even get to start the course. Then once they start the course, they come up into this like 7-layer whirlpool room. So it was meant to be steps where like the water came rushing down and they could, make their way up step to step. But because it was designed so poorly, on each step, the water would circle and form a whirlpool. So each individual step was a separate whirlpool. And so they had to go through all of that to navigate their way to get out the tunnel on the other end, which is why, for the most part, the only fish we saw really making it through were big fish. Like I rarely ever saw like a minnow came through. And if we were seeing shad, they were adults coming up to breed. And if we saw lamprey, they were adults coming up to breed. The buffalo probably had no trouble. The carp probably had no trouble. The quillback probably had no trouble. But in general, I think it was a pretty low efficiency ladder. But to be fair, that is why we do those studies. That passage was, I'm sorry to that person. I'm sure that was someone's brainchild and they designed it and wanted it to work. And, it didn't. And we learned from it.
Hey, man, not everything can work, right? I mean, what can you do? You gotta test it out.
Did a snakehead or a
comically
flathead
bad though?
did a snakehead or a flathead catfish ever go through there?
Not that I know of. That being said, there are flathead in the Raritan and there are flathead in the DNR Canal, but I don't believe one ever made its way through that tunnel. But that's probably on account of the fact that the opening is 10 feet off the bottom and it's shaped like this, and a flathead's just not going to explore like that.
Gotcha.
You'd have to find the secret passage. Did you ever see an Eastern European man in a scuba suit make it through there? Because I see a lot of them in the Delaware.
People. It was actually illegal to fish like below the dam or anything like that. A friend he asked me at the time, he's like, so you work, how illegal would it be for me to kayak up a bit and fish there? Because he's like, that has a pretty low passage rate. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so there's probably a bunch of fish sitting below it. And I'm like, yeah, probably.
Oh, God.
Chris, can I say goodbye to him or no?
Do you want to let him go, or do you want to get?
I don't think he wants to stay here. He doesn't want to stay here with us all night. So
no, yeah. Sometimes you got to just like kick yourself off, or we just keep talking about fishing.
We will keep talking. I could ask. I do have more questions, but I'm not going to bother him all night.
Do you have any opinions on snakeheads as an invasive species?
In what regard?
Well,
Chris believes that it's already too far gone to help, and we should just accept them. And that's
true of every public invasive species. Okay. Do you know how much money we spent to deal with lanternflies and freak out over that just to realize that they kind of balanced in the ecosystem fine? like they weren't that big of a deal. Do you remember the freakouts like 2 years ago?
Yes, I do.
And I said, if you see this bug, post this on call this.
Yeah, we had hotlines. We had a 911 for spotted lanternflies.
Oh, 911. I was just on
Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania government. The Pennsylvania government spent millions of dollars on first arrival to try and stop their spread and did absolutely nothing. Like, invasive species suck. I'm not saying invasive, I'm not, underplaying invasive species. They do a ton of damage to the ecosystem, but we just do not have the power to manage once they're like established. It's just done. Every time we've tried, we've given up. I don't know if you know about swamp eels in New Jersey.
I've
If
not
you were
heard of
around
that.
okay, so like a decade ago, there's these things called Asian swamp eels. They're sometimes an aquarium pet, and so they've been released in a bunch of ponds in New York in the city. Like a decade ago, I think 2012 maybe, they found some of them in this pond it's not Gibbsboro, Glassboro, somewhere in
Okay.
South Jersey. They found them in this pond. Someone saw it at night and was like, "Oh, that's a weird looking eel." Had a biologist come out, shocked it up. It's a swamp eel. It's not an American eel. Who knows how long they've been there, but there's hundreds, if not thousands of them. And so there's this big shtick about it. They get a bunch of funding. They go out there every single night. They do shocking, take them all up, kill them all. And I just talked to the guy recently because there's stopped being news. The news talked about it for like a week or two. I just talked to the guy recently. They still go every single year and do the shocking, and their CPUE, their catch per unit effort, has not changed, which essentially means however much effort they put in is how much fish they get out, which means that the population is not being harmed whatsoever by their shocking every year. We just accepted that they're there. So there are just swamp eels in the Cooper River and in some random ponds in South Jersey. And yeah, it just is what it is.
We got to catch
And
one of these.
why won't we just accept this same fate for the snakeheads and the flatheads? Wouldn't it be easier to, monitor them if they just made them a game species, let's just say, and people?
I do. Yeah, I agree. I think probably in an ideal world that's it. But the problem is the government is so public facing, public funded, they have to everything that any branch of the government has to do. They're constantly thinking about, trust me, if you've ever worked with the government, had to deal with HR, like they're constantly thinking about public perception of everything. And it's really hard, even as a trained biologist, to explain to a member of the public that yes, there's a species in our waters. Yes, it's harming our native fish and our native ecosystems. No, we're not going to do anything about it. No, we're just going to let them, we're going to let them be there. We're going to whatever, put them at a game speed. We're actually going to encourage people. It's like,
well, I mean,
it's a tough thing to explain.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's just in my head, I'm thinking like snakeheads. I've never eaten them, but they're supposedly good to eat. If you instead of people don't want to go out and kill all the snakeheads they catch for just because they were told to kill them. But if you had some information out there and people knew like, oh, I can cook it this way or that way, and it's delicious and it's good to fit, it's a great fighter. And like, I don't know, I just feel like it would be more beneficial at this point to go about it that way.
Yeah, I think you would like, I can't remember if it's Maryland or Delaware, not Delaware, they don't have snakehead. Maryland or Virginia, one of those states in that area is doing basically what you're talking about. So they've like rebranded it. They're calling them Channa, which is the genus name. Channa, Channa argus, northern snakehead. They're calling them Channa, sort of how like people started calling carp Kopi to try and convince people to eat it because people have negative association with carp. So they're calling snakehead Channa. They're encouraging people to fish them, to eat them. I've even seen articles or like Twitter posts from that government, that state government. Again, I can't remember what state it is, with like different recipes. Basically, they're trying what you're talking about. So it'll actually be really interesting if New Jersey keeps what it's doing up. And it'd be interesting to see the parallels in, however many years, how our populations end up versus how theirs do. It's actually a really cool study to look at because I do believe there are states doing exactly what you're talking about. They're just sort of accepting that they're here and encouraging people to interact with them.
Yeah, I think, I mean, like you said, you can't stop it at this point completely. Right. You just can't. It's impossible. I think it'd be cool. I hope they do studies that compare different areas and, like we said before, like you said, there'll always be variables that you can't account for in studies like that. But I think it'd be interesting. And I guess like Jurassic Park said, right, Joe? Nature finds a way.
God, here we go. All right. AVNJ on YouTube. Where else can they find you? Is that the only
that's
place?
Pretty much it.
You're just a YouTuber?
Pretty much.
The YouTube channel's big enough. He doesn't need anything else.
So AVNJ on YouTube, we want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your night to come talk to us here. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man. The insights from different perspective, like someone who actually is fish biologist, not just an angler. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You guys asked great questions and great inquiries. I was a little worried it was going to be somewhat antagonistic back and forth of like, this regulation said I can't do this and I want to do this.
No. We pretty much just wing it, but we're not total assholes.
Yeah, we are. Thank you so much, dude.
Of course. Thank you.
Take care, bud.
So yeah, we need to make plans to go down to South Jersey because I know Thomas Wyatt fishes that river all the time for white perch, so we could go for those eels he's talking about. Now
Yeah,
I have to catch one.
Have you heard it? Had you heard of those?
Never. No, a buffalo eel. When he said, "Oh,
no,
we had
not buffalo eel, Asian swamp eel."
Oh, an Asian swamp eel. What
you
was he
listen when people talk?
He said when he said there was a buffalo. What was he saying?
That was a buffalo sucker or buffalo carp. I think.
Yeah, I've never seen that either.
You've never caught them in upstate New York?
No.
Oh, I've caught them up there. I didn't know they were down here.
I knew what he was talking about with the quillbacks because
that I caught my first two, like what was it, 2 or 3 years ago in the Delaware. I didn't know what the hell it was. I had to look it up.
And the one I caught, it was huge. I thought it was like the world record bluegill when I first saw it. Like it was like a 5-pound bluegill, and I was looking at it. I caught it in the Passaic River. I was saying,
like a bluegill.
Well, it's kind of shaped like one in a way. Like it's like a circle,
like a fat carp, like a wide, short carp.
I was looking.
Giant.
I was literally. I caught it. Actually, I caught it right on the wall, but on the wall in the Passaic River. So it must be the same situation. They're just stuck there, and I had no idea what it was, and I had to look it up in a book. There wasn't even internet yet. I had to look it up in like an encyclopedia at pictures. I remember.
Yeah.
And it was blue quillback. But yeah, they're a cool fish too. That was cool to actually talk to like someone. I asked him if he was an environmentalist or a conservationist because being in that field he's in, it's kind of a tough choice to make because some of the stuff we kind of ignore he pays attention to, like mortality rates and stuff like that. So I could see how that type of a person could kind of lean towards more of an environmentalist.
I mean, but he does. He fishes. I think I forget how many species. He called himself a life lister, right? Like they try to catch as many species as possible, including even all those little fish that we'll never see.
Can I ask? I wanted to actually ask him this. When they do that. Well, I don't want to keep them forever. When they do that, they're obviously throwing like nets, right? They're not catching those fish with hooks.
Do you completely forget the episode we did with Fish Bro?
I didn't do that episode. I was on vacation. That was
Kevin. You're right. So you didn't watch it?
No, I know nothing about microfishing, but I kind of want to go. Like, are they throwing nets or
no?
They're catching with hooks?
I'm not even going to tell you. Anyone, including yourself, who's listening to this conversation right now, can go back and find the episode with Fish Bruh. That's FISHBRUH, Fish Bruh.
So you're telling me I got to go watch the NJ Multi-Species podcast if I want to learn about this?
Yes. And,
all right.
And I don't know. I don't even know what episode number it was. You got to search that
I'll
name.
I'll have to watch them all till I get to that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Who's the guest? Who's the guest next week?
So next week we got another interesting guest. So we have. I don't want to mispronounce the name.
So interesting. We don't know who it is.
No, I do know. I don't want to say the wrong name. Dennis Herring. So he's an angler, not in New Jersey, just over the border in Pennsylvania, real close. He fishes places that are, well, not for you. You're still going to have to drive all, but it ain't that far over the border. We'll just leave it at that. I don't know how much information he's going to want to give on the actual names of lakes or anything, but what he does is pretty cool. One of the things he does, he night fishes for the pure strain stripers that they have in a couple of the lakes over there.
I know who this is. Yeah, I've been waiting for this guy. I've been hoping he was going to invite us fishing, actually, because I want to catch. That's one fish I've never caught. Even in the Delaware River, I've never got one.
I've caught them in the river, but I have never caught a pure strange striper like landlocked in
Yeah,
a
it's
lake,
land.
a freshwater lake.
I guess the river. I've caught them in the Hackensack. Well, I guess that's saltwater anyway. That doesn't count. I've never caught one in freshwater. So yeah, it'll be cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It kind of seems. I don't know. We'll have to ask him, but it seems like it might be similar to the night fishing we do for the hybrid striped bass.
Really?
Which, like, just imagine hybrid striped bass fishing, but you're catching like a 30-pound striper. I mean, I know
crazy.
I know you can do this in Raritan Bay or wherever you can night fish it, but I don't know. This just seems different. It seems somehow maybe just because it's unique, it just seems cooler because you're on a freshwater lake.
Much lighter gear.
Yeah.
It sounds cool. Something I've always wanted to look into. All right, so that's the guest for next week. Am I missing anything else? Am I missing anything? No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
All right, we'll be back next week.
All right.
Try to stay cool.
Oh yeah, please stay cool. The heat is disgusting. And let me tell you something, dude. I was just in Oregon. It's basically a highlands desert there off the coast. It's like the coast is not desert, but where we were inland, it's basically highlands desert. It was over 100 degrees. Didn't have any effect on me because it's dry. I did not care. I sat under the bimini top, no effect. When I came back to New Jersey and this humidity and heat hit me, and like I'm trying to breathe and I feel like I have to chew on the air to like get oxygen out of it. Oh my God. I almost died coming back here. It's awful.
You wake up in the morning stuck to each other like two slices of bologna. You can't even go camping in New Jersey. You'll just it's horrifying.
No.
It's just horrible. No. All right, we'll be back next week. Try to survive the heat wave. Keep on suffering for the fish. I just stole his line.
Yeah, but not too much because it's really hot. We don't need anyone dying from heat stroke.
That's true. All right, goodbye.